Hi everyone, welcome to my knitting podcast. I like to do these types of episodes once every few months, usually like once a quarter, to catch up on what I've been knitting. I also have been spinning, and I do have a crochet project as well to show you at the end. So I'll show you all my FOs. I have 4 in total, including 3 sweaters, and then I have a couple whips that I will show you. I am vlogging the making of these new projects, so you're gonna get a bit of a preview, and then I'll post some project vlogs. So hopefully you don't mind getting a little sneak peek. I'll start with what I'm wearing, which is one of my finished objects. This is the Umbria Summer top by Cookie the Knitter. And I knit this out of Knitting for Olive Cotton Merino, which was my first time working with this yarn. I really like it. I definitely want to work with it again in more projects. It's very comfortable to wear, and I think the stitch definition is really nice. It's very crisp. So it was a good choice for this broken rib stitch little cardigan top. The colorways that I used are Blueberry Ice Cream for the main color, and then the colors that I striped with are Red Currant and Mole. To get into the pattern, I have a lot of thoughts, but I knit the size 3. For reference, I have about a 37 to a 38 inch bust, and I ended up knitting this at a tighter gauge than what the pattern calls for, just because I didn't want this to be see-through. I want to be able to wear it without like a shirt underneath. So my gauge was a little bit tighter. I ended up going up a size to compensate for that. So I knit the size 3. I think the fit is actually really great. I was a little bit worried about it maybe being too big, but I think it's like perfect. It fits me really nicely. I do have a vlog of me finishing my whips, and this is one of them that I was working on. So that vlog has a lot more of my like process thoughts and things that I was figuring out as I went, but I'll try to summarize like the mods that I made and what my overall experience was like with this pattern. So first, my mods, I changed the button band and the neckband to be double knit. In the pattern, they are, I think, 1x1 rib, and you work both of them integrated into the pattern. So this is a top-down pattern. You start by casting on the neckband, you knit the ribbing, and then you get into the raglan yoke. And then at the same time, while you're working the body, you work the button band stitches. And in the pattern, she tells you to like knit these stitches a little bit tighter than the rest of the sweater. I don't really like that technique because I don't think it's very reliable. I think it's kind of hard to know for certain if you are knitting those stitches tight enough. So I would just prefer to go down a couple of needle sizes, but that does get a little annoying to knit the stitches for the button band on different needles if you are integrating it into the rest of the sweater. So I just decided I would leave off the button band, leave off the neck ribbing, and knit those afterwards. So I knit the full body without those, and once I had finished, I picked up stitches for the button band. Because it's double knitting, I picked up a stitch in every single row. I double knit the bands on both sides, one with buttonholes, of course. And then I picked up for the neckband, again, 1 stitch in every row or every stitch, depending on where I was picking it up. I use the technique where you pick up a stitch, yarn over, pick up a stitch, yarn over, repeat that. And that's how you can get like double your stitches to set you up to knit in double knitting. And I'm really happy with these mods. I don't think I would have liked the result if I had knit it to pattern. And I knew that going into it, so I am glad that I made those modifications. One thing you'll notice is that my collar, or just like the top of the neckband, doesn't fold over like it does in the pattern photos, and I think that's for 2 reasons. One is that I just didn't knit this with as much positive ease as she has in the pattern photos, and then 2, my neckband is a little bit more structured, I would say, than the rib, and so it just naturally wants to like stand up like that, and I'm perfectly happy with that. I think it kind of worked out for the best because I wasn't sure how I felt about the inside of the striping, as well as the inside of where I picked up for the button band. So I was sort of hoping that it would lay like this because I think it works best with the way that I decided to mod this pattern. Speaking of the stripes, I knit 8 rows of the main color in between 2 rows each of the contrast colors. And also at the start of the pattern, you do knit short rows to shape the back. And I just knit all of that in the main color. I didn't bother with any striping during the short rows. I think that would look a little sloppy, or at least I couldn't figure out how to make that look better. So I just decided to knit the full thing in the main color. And I don't think that you really notice. Let me move my hair out of the way again, but like you can see this is a thicker section than the rest of the stripes. I was a little worried about that when I first cast on, but I don't think it is an issue whatsoever. To talk about the button band again one last time, I just have a couple more things to say. The buttons that I went with, I really like. These are a brown like matte shell button that I got from La Mercerie. They have a really big button selection there, so I had picked up several different types when I was choosing buttons for my port cardigan. And so I had these on hand and I thought they would be perfect to match the brown stripe, which if I had gone out to choose buttons for this cardigan specifically, I probably would have chosen like some sort of periwinkle blue and tried to color match the main color. But the fact that I was working with what I had and the brown buttons seemed to go well with this, worked out great in the end because I kind of actually really like the brown buttons with this. Now, one thing you'll notice in my FO photos is that my button band has these gaps in between the buttons. It's not terrible, but it's definitely there. And of course, I was trying to prevent this from happening by modifying it into a double knit button band. So it's disappointing that I still ended up with some gapping like that. I think I should have sewn the buttons closer to the inside of the button band just to give the fabric a little bit more of an overlap to help the rest of the button band like stay aligned. But I sewed them on right in the middle of the button band. I've only made a couple cardigans actually, and I think I'm just gonna chalk this up to inexperience in putting buttons on a garment. So I'll definitely know for next time, and this also would be a pretty easy thing to fix. But I actually decided to do something different, and I did this after I took FO photos and wrote notes on Ravelry and stuff. So this is sort of an update after the fact. Now you can see that it does line up very closely. So what I did was I sewed down the outside of the bottom button band to the inside of the top band. And I just did this by turning the garment inside out and sewing the outer edge of the button band into my seam line. And it was pretty easy, honestly, just to like follow each stitch up with my seam. And so what this results in is a closed button band. So I can't wear this open, but I honestly don't think I ever would. I think I will always wear this garment closed, which is why I sewed it up. If I ever want to change that, it would be pretty easy to take out this seam. You can see that it does hold this button band in line, so there's no gapping anymore, but it doesn't look like I sewed it down. Like from the side, it still looks like it's a real button band. So even though I went to all of this effort to try to prevent the gapping in the button band that you see in the pattern photos, I still ended up with it a little bit. But I think that this solution worked out fine, and I really like wearing it now. So I'm glad that I did that. Maybe long term I will revisit this and take the seam out and re-sew on the buttons if I ever want to wear this open. But this actually was the first time that I knit a double knit button band. I'm pretty sure. I don't think I've knit one before. So I learned some things and will definitely use that in the future when I knit double knit button bands. The last thing I want to say about this pattern is I wasn't very impressed by the pattern writing style. There are a lot of charts for the shaping, like the increases that you do, And I found that overcomplicated. I ended up just ignoring the charts because I think it's a simple enough stitch pattern to figure out as you increase how to stay in pattern. I don't really think that we needed all of those charts. It's also a pattern that is written very row by row. And so that means that you have to be exactly on stitch and row gauge, which, as you know, I wasn't. And there's no schematic, at least that I could find. I couldn't find one anywhere. So it did make it hard to make the modifications that I wanted to make, and I don't know that I really followed this pattern. There's also some waist shaping in the pattern, and I ended up deciding not to knit that because I didn't really like how the designer had integrated the decreases and the increases for it. I just didn't think it looked very good in this stitch pattern, so I just decided to exclude it. But that's not to discourage anyone from knitting this. I would say if you want to knit the pattern exactly to pattern and you get gauge, then the pattern will walk you through everything step by step, and it might actually be good for beginners. But if you want to make any modifications, just know what you're getting into. Okay, that one was kind of a lot. I don't think I'll have as much to say about the rest of my projects, but the next one that I want to share is my Larch Pullover by Paula Lemme. This is a bottom-up circular yoke sweater with this beautiful half fisherman's rib yoke with these eyelet rows in between the ribbing. I knit this out of Rowan felted tweed in the colorway Pickle, which is unfortunately a discontinued colorway. I purchased this from a D-stash, and it's really sad because it's such a good color. I love this color, and I love this sweater. I really like how this turned out. I wasn't sure about it at the start because I was using this as sort of a test to work on my knitting machine. This was my first project on my knitting machine, and I knit it hybrid. So I knit the stockinette body and sleeves on the knitting machine flat, and then I seamed it, and I put all the stitches on a circular needle as if I had knit it all by hand, and I hand knit the yoke. And I really don't think it could have turned out any better. I think this is going to get a lot of wear from me. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of Rowan felted tweed, I find it a little scratchy, but I just really like the way that this turned out, and I think it'll be worth the slight discomfort that I experienced while wearing it. I decided to knit the size 2, which I think was like the perfect size. Like maybe I could have gone up one size to get a little bit of a roomier fit. But since this is a circular yoke, I actually think I prefer a little bit less positive ease. There are short rows beneath the yoke, and so you can see it does raise the back neck. So the shaping is really nice. And I do recommend this pattern, just with a few notes. First, I would say the gauge is closer to a sport weight or a fingering weight, but it calls for a DK weight. So just keep that in mind. If you do decide to go with a DK weight, you might have to knit at a very dense gauge because it calls for a gauge of 6 stitches per inch. And I used a sport weight yarn, and I had to go down to a US 1 and a US 2 for the parts that I hand knit. So just be aware of that going in. The second thing is that I actually knit the yoke inside out because the pattern has you knitting the other side of the half fisherman's rib. So what you see on mine is not actually what the pattern has you knitting. And that was just a personal preference thing. And the third thing is that for some of the decrease rounds, the designer doesn't do the math for you. She points you to an online knitting calculator and tells you to calculate your decrease rate yourself. And that's just a pet peeve of mine. It's such simple math that any designer should be able to do that no problem, but it's just kind of an annoying thing to read in a pattern when you're knitting along, and then you have to like stop and open this knitting calculator up, and maybe one day that website won't be maintained anymore, so then you have to figure out how to do it on a normal calculator. I just think it's something that is so easy to do as a designer. You can do it in a spreadsheet for all the sizes quickly, and I don't understand why you wouldn't just do the math as you've done the rest of the math and include that in the pattern. I don't mind doing the math. Like, I do math all the time for my own knitting, but that's because I'm choosing to do that. And I just think if you're paying for a pattern, you shouldn't have to do simple math like that. Anyway, I do recommend the pattern with that caveat, but I'm very happy with how my finished sweater turned out. I like it a lot. And this was a project that I actually planned last fall. So I'm really happy to have it off the needles. Next up is my Viola Tee by Ronya Huccoletto. This is a gorgeous colorwork yoke t-shirt pattern. And I had not heard of this pattern, but I was watching Lock Knits. I think it must have been about a year ago now. And she had a friend on who was podcasting with her, and her name is Melissa. Melissa Rossi Tattoos is her Instagram. And she was wearing this pattern in very similar colors to what I chose. I basically copied her. But I just loved the way that looked. So I had to make one of my own. I really loved knitting this. This is another hybrid project where I knit the yoke by hand and then I knit the body in stockinette on my knitting machine. The sleeves I just knit by hand because they were very short. It probably would have taken longer to knit them on the machine, honestly. But I really like how it turned out. I used BC Garn Bio Balance for the main color, which is what the pattern calls for actually. And this is a cotton wool blend. It's 55% wool and 45% cotton. So I wouldn't wear this in the summer, but I think it's gonna make a great transition piece. And then my contrast colors are Trilogy Yarns Plush, which is a superwash. I think it's an MCN actually, merino, cashmere, nylon. I'm pretty sure. So not the best for color work, but I just saw this color and really liked it. And I had it in my stash when I decided to make this project. So I really wanted to use this just for the color. And then the other one that I used is this MadTosh Eurostock. It's a really old skein. It's in the colorway Porcelain. If I remember correctly, I had to go down a needle size to knit the color work, which is very unusual for me. I don't knit color work super often, but when I do, I've always had to go up one or maybe even two needle sizes. This is another pattern where the short rows are at the base of the yoke and not at the start. So for the back, you don't see any of the main color on its own. I think I could have used just a few more short rows. I mean, you can see the back is raised there, but the front could come down just ever so slightly to be a little bit more comfortable. So if I ever knit this again, I'll keep that in mind. I also, while I was knitting, I totally accidentally ignored the notes in the pattern that said not to knit certain rows in the chart for my size. I think there's an extra 5 rounds that I just knit into the yoke, and I didn't realize it until I got to the very end, and I was like, oh, I didn't even see these notes. So that was just me not paying attention. I don't think it's too deep at all. In fact, if I hadn't knit those rounds, maybe it would be ever so slightly too short. So I guess it worked out for me in the end, but yeah, it felt a little dumb. Okay, this last FO is not a sweater. It is an accessory, and it is a collar, which I have never knit before. This is a ruffled collar that I knit for a concert that we went to a couple of months ago. It goes really well with what I'm currently wearing. So this is the Clowning Around pattern by Theodora Goes Wild. And this is just a fun, ruffled little knit collar. The reason I knit this was I was going to a Hot and Freddy concert. If you haven't seen Hot and Freddy, they are a pop duo, and they have this very 18th century, ran away from the circus and stole the queen's wardrobe kind of style. And they're so fun live. I've seen them twice now. And it's a bit of a thing if you want to dress up for their concerts and also to DIY your costume. So I knew I had to make something, but I did cut it a little close on the timing. I wanted to go all out and make a whole fit, but this was sort of the best I could do with the time that I had. And this was really fun to make, but honestly more fun to wear. Here's a photo of how I styled it for the concert. I had so much fun. We went with a couple of friends and just had a great time. And I'm really happy that I finished my collar in time. I think the reason I was able to finish in time is that I did knit most of this on my knitting machine. So I'm getting a lot of use out of my knitting machine. I'm really liking it. So the pattern calls for a mohair, and I went to my local yarn store and I picked up this Berroco Aerial, which is the first time I've used this particular mohair actually, and I like it. It's very similar to other mohairs that I've used. This is in the colorway Firecracker. I'm really glad I went with this red. I knew I wanted a red, but I think they had 3 different shades, and compared to the other shades, this looked almost orange, and I was like, I don't know if it'll come across as red, and I don't want there to be too much orange in it. But when I brought it home and was just looking at it isolated, I was like, oh no, this is a red. Like, this is not an orange. I am glad that I just ended up knitting a collar in the end, because at first I was thinking about knitting like a cardigan or a top, and I was a little worried about being too hot because I went to the concert in June. That fear was not unfounded because it was hot as balls. And I did get very hot in this collar, but I wore it the whole night. Mostly the issue was that the venue itself just like was way too hot. So I'm glad that I just had the mohair collar and I didn't try to make a shirt. So the way that you knit this collar is you knit 2 giant like thin rectangles, and then you knit them together to like gather your stitches, and that is what creates the ruffles. And so there's 2 layers here. I knit all of the stockinette on my knitting machine, and then I hand knit, there's like a couple rows of garter stitch at the bottom. I hand knit the garter stitch, and then I hand knit the 2 pieces together. One thing I will say about the pattern is that I don't know that the pattern photos are depicting the same gauge that's listed in the pattern, because I did start actually knitting this, like hand knitting this, using the needles that the pattern calls for, and it was so loose and sloppy and it just didn't look good. And so I kind of suspect that the pattern photos are knit at a much smaller gauge, because her gauge just looks very nice and tight. Like, I kept checking if the pattern was having you to hold 2 strands of mohair together, because that's kind of what it looks like in the pattern photos, but I think it just was asking you to hold 1 strand. I probably would hold 2 though if I were to make this again, because it turned out a little less voluminous than what I was wanting. I really wanted just like a big ruffled clown collar for the concert, and it just wasn't quite as ruffly as I wanted it to be. Okay, I am already heating up in this, so I'm gonna take it off. Oh, and if everything goes to plan, I did film me making this collar, so I will have that in a vlog at some point. I don't know exactly when that will come out. So that is everything that I have finished in the last few months. It's been a very sweater heavy quarter, and I have cast on another sweater to share with you. So you're going to be seeing things a little bit out of order here with some of my upcoming videos. It's just kind of the nature of knitting being slow. I can't really show you everything in real time. So I do apologize for that. If you watch my knitting vlogs, you're gonna see me starting these projects. But one of my summer crafting plans was to make a lacy top. And I decided to knit the Isabel top by the Knit Pearl Girl. Here is my swatch in this beautiful colorway. It is so pretty. I'm having a very like red forward summer and I'm not mad about it. This yarn is from Ritual Dyes. It is their Undine, and this is in the colorway Jewelweed. I picked this up at the yarn store Handwork when I was there in Salt Lake City a couple months ago. It's 60% cotton, 40% linen. And so this is going to be perfect for the summer, perfect for a vest like this. The Isabel top is a tank top or a vest. You can knit either option, and it is all over lace. So let me show you where I'm at. This is the back panel, and I'm working on the underarm increases. So that is where the stitch you saw in my swatch comes in. This stitch is at the sides and the underarms, but for the most part, the top is knit in this gorgeous lace motif. It's so pretty. It's so much fun to knit. I'm having such a fun time with this pattern, and I'm really happy that I decided to go with it. It's a very thorough pattern, and it has, I believe, 18 sizes. So what a feat from Sophie of the Knit Pearl Girl. Definitely want to check out her other patterns. I really like watching her podcast here on YouTube. She just has a lot of like thoughtful analysis on designing. So I'm knitting the 4th size, which I think is like 37 3/4 inches at the bust. And I have decided to knit one of the cardigan versions. There's one with buttons and then there's one with ties. And I haven't fully decided, but I think I'm gonna go with the ties version. So I'm very excited for this. I love the color. I like working with this yarn. It honestly hasn't been like that hard on my hands so far. I'm noticing it ever so slightly, but it's not been too bad. And I think it's gonna be great to wear in the summer. Oh, and I actually got gauge for once. I knit so many of my patterns off gauge because I like the fabric density that I like and I want to make modifications, but it's actually been really nice to just follow the pattern and not have to like think too hard about it. There was one section where it was like, if you got row gauge, you'll have knit X amount of rows. And I was like, yes, that's me. I got row gauge. And it was very exciting. I think it's just been a while since I've knit a pattern fully on gauge. My other knitting project is a second Jaunty shawl by Andrea Mowry. This is the hand spun Jaunty that I'm knitting. I think it's coming out so interesting. My partner said it is kind of giving seafoam a little bit, and yeah, I don't know, it's really cool. This is the skein that I spun. I have a whole spinning vlog on it for the Jaunty along that Andrea Mowry was hosting. I think it's like long over now. I totally missed like the deadline. But I'm not in a rush at all to be knitting this. In fact, this is the project that I cast on as just an easy, mindless project that I can like pick up and set down very easily. I'll take this in the car or just like work on it at the end of the day, right before I go to bed, stuff like that. So I'm just like making slow and steady progress on it. I mean, I always love knitting with hand spun. It's just so enjoyable. And this is a 3-ply, so it's very squishy. So I used 3 different braids to spin this. The first is Yarn Jam Confetti Tweed. So that is where you're seeing those tweed bits. That's coming from that braid. In the colorway Neon Sunset is a really beautiful colorway. I picked that up from La Mercerie when I was there back in November. And then I paired that with a Hello Yarn BFL in the colorway Bonbons. That was just sort of a random colorway I saw that she had in stock, and I really liked it. And the two went together pretty well, but I wanted to add in some blue. I had 2 ounces of this Targhee from Fat Cat Knits in my stash, and I just thought that it all went well together. And so I spun this 3-ply, and I'm so curious to see what the rest of the shawl is going to turn out to be. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I combo drafted all of these braids together. So I was going for a more heathered look, which it's kind of hard to tell at this stage exactly if I accomplished that. I think so, but you know, you can still see some of the striping, but we'll see as I continue to make progress on this how the rest of it turns out. Okay, I'll continue talking about spinning, and then I want to show you my crochet sweater that I finally started. But first, a little TDF recap. I do have a Tour de Fleece vlog if you missed it, but I didn't actually do that much spinning. I mostly processed fleece during the month of July, but I did finish this spin. Well, I started and finished this. This is a skein from a braid by Lobby and May. It is their confetti base, so it is also a very tweedy yarn, and it's in the colorway Amy's Peach Sweater. I spun this as a 2-ply, but I spun it quite thick, mostly because of those tweed parts. I was just trying to stay as consistent as I could. And so I would say it's like, probably ranges from like a worsted to an Aran weight. I ended up with just under 100 yards, so I could see this either being like maybe a small scarf or like part of a sweater, maybe like part of the yoke of a sweater or something like that. I haven't fully decided yet. I washed and picked a lot of fleece, and at the very end of the tour, I did some carding. I carded up these bats of CVM, California Variegated Mutant. It is a mutation of the Rommeldale breed. It's a very soft, very nice fleece. So I have these 3 of just the pure white from the sheep, and then I also carded this one where I mixed it in with a little bit of Corriedale to make this very light green bat, which I'm very excited to spin up. And then also with the blending, I blended this one with some like rusty Corriedale that I had, and I think this one turned out really cool. And then, because I can't card without testing, I spun this little test skein, which is so just like pretty and squishy. I love this. I would love a whole sweater out of this, but I don't know if that is in the cards because I've talked a little bit about this before. I would eventually like to sell my hand-processed bats. I don't know when it will happen, and I don't know if any of these bats will be for sale, but it is something that I would eventually really like to do. I love processing fleece. I love making bats. And I have so many ideas and so many things that I want to do, but setting up a business is a whole endeavor. So I will of course keep you fully in the loop on that if it happens. I have a lot of fleece to process and a lot of work ahead of me. So I am going to test spin some of these other bats, but I don't have like a project in mind with this. I'm just kind of creating to create, and we'll see what comes out of it. Okay, lastly, I want to show you the crochet cardigan that I started. This is such a fun project. I am really loving it. If you follow me, you have seen me talk about the Rockmore cardigan by Anna D. She published this in Pom Pom magazine, but I think you can buy just the pattern on its own. But here is my swatch. It's this really cool wavy kind of pattern, and I'm crocheting it out of Ampersand Fibers Jenson DK in the colorway Vermilion number 2. It's really gorgeous deep rust red, loving the reds. And I have started the right front, so here is where I'm at. So this is the ribbing down here, and it's like a very deep V-neck cardigan, and now I am just working like the rest of the front on this side. I have just like a few more rows to go, but I'm having so much fun with this. I have had to like rip it out a few times. I've crocheted one sweater, but it was a granny square sweater, so I don't feel like it really counted towards my understanding of how to construct a sweater in crochet. This one is crocheted side to side, so I am working the rows like up and down. So really I'm working on it this way, but it will be worn this way. So I'm kind of considering this like my first crochet sweater. I did learn to crochet as a kid before I learned to knit, so I think I made a few crochet sweaters like as a child, but I don't remember any of them really being successful. And then knitting really took off for me, so I just never returned to it. But this has just been a ton of fun to feel like I'm kind of learning a new craft a little bit. It's also going pretty quickly. I only started this like maybe a week ago tops. And I feel like I've already made so much progress. Yeah, stay tuned. I will have a video just on the making of this if everything goes well. So you will be able to see the process that I've gone through to make this. But I really like the pattern. It is well written, it's easy to understand, and I now have so many crochet sweaters that I want to make. So this will for sure not be the last crochet sweater. Okay, so those are all of the projects, all the things I've been working on. I want to give an update on my bingo because I meant to do this in my last quarterly update and I totally forgot, and I'm now kind of overdue on an update. So if you're not familiar, at the start of this year, I started a knitting or a making bingo, and kind of started it as a KAL or a MAL, a make-along, and we have a Discord about it where we share our whip updates and what we're working on. There is an official bingo card if you want to follow along, but you are very encouraged to kind of make your own bingo because this lasts a whole year and everyone's making is so personal. And so it's very much up to you to decide what you want to include. It could either be specific projects or it could be like prompts, anything you want really. So here is the bingo card that I made and that I am following. I have knitting, spinning, crocheting, and sewing on here. Now, I have not hit bingo yet, but I am close. I have decided to only count one project toward each square, so I'm not like doubling up and crossing off more than one square per project. That's just something that I've decided to do because I want to try to get as many of these done as I can, but you are more than welcome to like cross off multiple squares if one project fits all of those prompts. But okay, let me update you on what I've done so far. Several people in our Discord have put the photo of their project as like on the square that they've completed, and I really liked that idea, so I stole it. So I'll just start from the top and kind of work my way down. The first one that I completed is a triangle scarf or shawl. I finished that at the beginning of this year. That was the first Jaunty that I knit. Next, a vest, slipover, or tank. I knit the Tessellated Vest by Andrew Mallory. Knit in public. I did this very quickly in the beginning of the year. I actually don't knit in public too often, but it was an easy one to do and scratch off. Reverse Fleagle Heel. I finished my Christmas socks in January. It is a free pattern that you can find on Ravelry. Project from Stash. I am counting my Larch Pullover as a project from Stash because I bought the yarn without knowing exactly what I wanted to do with it. I bought it from a D-stash and it just kind of sat there for a bit. But overall, I would say I do struggle a little bit knowing for certain if I am using Stash for a project because I tend to buy 4 projects, and sometimes I'll buy like a sweater's quantity for a project and I'll change my mind on what sweater I want to knit, and that sat in my stash for a couple of months, but I technically bought it to knit a sweater. I don't know. I'm overthinking it really, but that one I decided to count as a project from Stash. Next is a 3-ply, which you just saw the yarn for that. D-stash is just a free square. Colorwork yoke I just finished of my Viola Tee. Figuring weight sweater, the one that I'm wearing right now. Project in a week. This one I thought I might have to like set out to find a project that I could complete in a week, but I ended up hitting that with my clown collar. I knit it in just a few days, so that worked out great. And then lastly, knit with handspun. The first project that I knit with handspun, or that I finished knitting with handspun, was my port cardigan, which crazily is on the front page of Ravelry. That was not on my bingo card. So you can see I've got quite a few things that I still need to finish up, but I will be hitting a bingo here soon because if you see in this row where I only have one square left, that one is a non-wool item, which is the Isabel top that I just cast on. So once I finish that, I will complete a bingo, but I am, I'm aiming for a blackout here. I do want to achieve as many of these as I can. But we'll see because we're already over halfway through the year. So it's a decent amount of time left, but it's not a ton of time left. Last year I did a video where I was trying to mark off some of the squares on my bingo, and I think it would be fun to do that again this year. So that'll probably be a project vlog before the end of the year where I just go through and plan out some projects that work to fit these prompts and work on them. So yeah, that's my update on the bingo. If you want to participate, you are welcome to join our Discord. There's like no expectations or anything. We're all just kind of chatting and sharing what we're working on. So that is the end of this update. I know I covered a lot, but hopefully you got some inspiration. And since we are kind of nearing the end of summer and heading into fall, I'm curious, well, at least on the Northern Hemisphere, I'm curious if there are any projects or a specific project that you are really trying to finish up before we transition seasons. For me, it would definitely be the Isabel top. That's like my main focus because I want to be able to wear that before it gets cold. And in my timeline right now, I probably have a good 2 months before it's gonna get chilly, although I could definitely wear that vest over a long sleeve shirt. So I guess problem solved right there. Anyway, just let me know what you're working on. I always like hearing from you, and I'll see you in another video.